Yum, yum!
Greg here from Pixel Fondue. In this video, I'm going to scatter two different mesh prototypes onto this ball, but I'm going to divide up their distribution based on this texture. So in this case, I've got a red cone. We just sort of isolate it here. This red cone is going to show up where the black is, and then I've got a gold sphere, and that's going to show up where the white is on this ball here, according to that texture. And to do that, I'm going to use a couple of different nodes. So down here in the schematic, I've got one replicator for my gold spheres and one replicator for my red cone. So let's just plug those guys into the prototypes. And now I need a particle source for each one. And for that, I'm going to use a surface particle generator, and that will scatter particles on my ball here. So I just take my ball and I plug it into the source surface, and there's going to be little particles on there, which you probably can't see because they're microscopic. But if I turn the average spacing down to 10 millimeters, you'll see them sort of filling up there. And if I turn my minimum spacing up to like maybe 8 millimeters, it'll sort of even out the distribution. So all the little particles scattered on there are going to be, oops, not 80, 8. And so they're going to be, minimum spacing of 8 and then an average spacing of 10. So pretty even distribution. And if I plug this into my particle source right here, you'll see I've got red cones on everything, right? And so we need to actually add a couple more nodes to divide those up according to that texture. I'm going to use a particle sieve node. So just over here on your particles category, grab a particle sieve modifier, double click it, bring in the scene, and I'm going to plug my surface particle generator into the particle source just like that. And just to show you how this works, I'll plug my particle sieve modifier into the particle source of this red cones replicator here. And this is sort of works on an if-then sort of premise, right? So right now it's if the particle ID, so all the particles that you see on this scattered on this sphere have a particle ID between 0 and 1, right? And so the concept here is if the particle ID is less than 0.5, it'll keep it. So if I turn this all the way down to like 0.05, it's keeping very few of those particles. If I turn it all the way up to 0.99, it's keeping almost all of them. I can also change this to greater than or less than or equals to or equals, not equals, in range, out range. So there's a lot of options here for how you're going to, so if I say less, or if I say like greater than, there's very few, right? Very few particle IDs are greater than 0.99. So there's a lot of flexibility in which particles you want to keep and which you want to get rid of. And in our case, we want to get rid of or keep ones based on that dots texture. So I'm going to go over here to my shader tree, and here I've got my dots texture. I'm going to right click and say duplicate. I'm going to drag the duplicate down into the nodes folder. Then I'm going to drag it over here into the schematic. And I'm going to add a texture fall off on this particle sieve node in the little fall off slot there. So let's select a particle sieve node and add a texture fall off. And there it is right there. And you can guess that we're going to drag our little purple graph connector to the texture slot of the texture fall off. And then I just have to change my particle sieve modifier to look at, instead of particle ID, the fall off values right here. I'll just select fall off. And I want to say if the fall off value is equal to 0, which is the black part of the dots texture, then it should keep those particles. If you're not seeing anything here, you can just flick your dots texture on and off. It may not be evaluated. The little eyeball there should do it. And so here you can see, if I just open up my render window again, that everywhere that dots texture is black, I've got a red cone stuck to it, right? So if I hide my red cone replicator there, you can see there's the black part. I turn it back on, it's got a red cone. Everywhere there's something black, right? So I'll just pause that, and then I'm going to add another particle sieve modifier and just sort of do the opposite thing on the other side. So double click that, and whoops, we don't want that connected there. We actually want to drag our same fall off into the fall off slot of the second particle sieve. And we want our particle generator, surface particle generator, to go into the particle source. But this one, instead of going equal to 0, we're going to do equal to 1. So we want to set this to fall off. Make sure you set it to fall off so it's analyzing the fall off values. And we want to say equals, and we want to say 1. So it should just keep the parts on the white. And I'll plug this into my gold sphere replicator. Now I've got gold spheres where it's white and red cones where it's black. So that's how you use a particle sieve modifier to determine placement of your replicas based on a texture. So super, these sieve modifier nodes are super flexible. Like I said, there's all kinds of inputs and you can do all kinds of conditions. And so they're super useful, and this is just one use of them.
Yum, yum!